Children have no business being on social media. And no, I don't mean they shouldn't be using social media. I mean they shouldn't be on it. Period. Bonjour amigos. Welcome to the Calipolis. If you're new here, I believe the answer to our collective challenges right now is truth and love. So I'm posting videos offering insight into how you can incorporate more truth and love into your life based on my personal experiences and worldviews. This is my Plato's Allegory of the Cave in Real Life series, where I take Plato's wisdom from 2,400 years ago and apply it to modern everyday life. I've spent the last 6 months kind of laying the foundation of this channel. We started with kind of a 101 on Plato's Allegory of the Cave, where I provided a general overview of the allegory, and we talked about how the allegory might help us better understand our relationship with truth. Then I went over 3 different examples, 3 different caves or areas of life where many of us are probably in the cave. I used Plato's allegory to help explain or suggest why some of us, our understanding of those areas of life might be based on shadows and not the actual thing. Many of us, in my opinion, are basing our understanding of these areas on a distorted perception of reality. And because our understanding of those areas of life are based on distorted perceptions of reality, the outcomes we attain in those areas of life aren't what we expect. And that can cause a lot of frustration, sometimes anger and resentment. And that's what we're trying to avoid, right? The whole point of this channel, the whole point of this work is to seek clarity in life so we are better equipped to pursue our goals, our desired outcomes. We then turned our attention to the rejection of the enlightened prisoner, right? The chained prisoners in the cave reject the enlightened prisoner who comes to free them. We talked about why that happens and why you are probably doing it in your life and why you're probably going to do it with me in this channel. And then finally, I provided some personal insight, some experiences on how I have dealt with that natural reaction to reject the enlightened prisoner, how I've overcome it myself, and how you might use some of my personal experience to overcome it in your life. So you can kind of think of all that stuff as like the theoretical in-class sessions part of the curriculum. But now we're going to move towards the practicum piece where we step into the field, but we're going to do it together, right? So we're going to go back to these 3 areas that we touched on before: social media, education, and the fog of war. We're going to delve a bit deeper into those caves, but now we're going to apply the tools that we talked about to these areas of life so we can confront those truths head on. And just a general housekeeping matter, I post my full videos, the full-length videos, on YouTube. These are often 10 to 30 minutes in length. I just sit here and talk it usually takes about 30 minutes. I believe that that is the best way to consume this type of content because that's how I make it. But if that's not your thing and you prefer to watch it in shorter clips, I clip those long form videos into shorter segments of 3 minutes or less, and I upload them as shorts or reels to TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. So if you prefer to follow along that way, make sure you follow the channel, and I post chronologically every day. So you'll consume the whole video in segments of 3 minutes or less, if that's your preference. Okay, so this is obviously the back to the social media cave. I came in a little hot in the hook there, but that it was purposely provocative to draw you in. Okay, so this is the Calipolis, and in the Calipolis, you got to give the people what they want. I just want to soften the hook a little bit. That is my personal opinion, and that is the thesis of this video. But my stronger personal opinion and the general theme, the underlying theme of this whole channel is that I am not above, or I don't know better than anybody else. Okay, so there are people I care deeply about that are probably going to watch this video, who post their kids online, and they're great parents. Okay, their kids are so lucky to have them as parents, and that's why the truth hurts, right? Because the truth hurts because it pierces the heart, and the bigger the heart, the more the hurt. So I do want to address that right up front, that there is, of course, nuance to this topic, and we're going to get to that nuance later on in the video, but I just kind of want to soften the hook a little bit to kind of give your ego permission to continue with the video. All right, so back in the cave. I love this diagram. So the prisoners in the cave, remember, they're chained in the cave, they're forced to look forward, they can only see the shadows. The shadows will have the prisoners believing that social media is just a part of everyday life. It's just something that we do, right? We take the picture, we post the picture online. That's part of our life now. Remember, there's some truth within that. It's a distorted perception of reality. But if we turn around and we look at the object in front of the fire, we can see that it's not just something that we do. It's not just a part of everyday life. What social media actually is a service, right? And if you are using social media, if you are using that service, you are engaging in a transaction. So the shadows will have you thinking, for many reasons, that social media is just a natural part of human behavior now. And perhaps it is. Again, there's some truth to that. But we must not forget that it is a service provided by a real company, right? And we are engaging with that service in a transactionary manner. Like any voluntary transaction, which this is, we voluntarily use social media. There are at least two parties that benefit from the transaction. Otherwise, the transaction wouldn't exist because it's voluntary. The provider of the service benefits, right? Otherwise, they wouldn't provide that service. And the user of that service benefits. Otherwise, they wouldn't use the service. Remember, it's all a voluntary transaction. So let's think about here who benefits from this transaction. Remember, this transaction that most of us partake in many times a day. The two primary beneficiaries are the provider and the user. So the provider being, Meta, so Mark Zuckerberg and his shareholders, X, right, Elon Musk and his shareholders. These parties benefit primarily through financial gain. And then the user of the service also benefits. I can't claim to know exactly why each user benefits, right? That's a subjective valuation, right? But I am certain that the user does benefit because otherwise they wouldn't use it, right? So there is some benefit to the user. I can speculate, right? External validation is, I believe, a primary driver of the average social media user. But of course, there's other incentives too, like financial gain for the user as well. Me right now, I benefit by using social media to expand my reach far beyond what I could without it. Okay, so there are tangible uses to the user beyond just, psychological reasons such as external validation. Who else benefits, right? So by user of social media, I'm talking primarily about the poster of the content, right? In this case, we're talking about posting children on social media. So the person who posts the child is who I'm saying benefits in some way from the transaction. But other people benefit as well, right? So other viewers of the content, so not just the not just the poster itself, but also people who view the post, right? They benefit as well, or they stand to benefit at least, not everybody, but there certainly are viewers of the post who benefit from the transaction having taken place. So think like, mom or dad posts their child on, let's say, Facebook, and viewers of that post, you've got grandma, grandpa, aunts and uncles, older cousins, right? They all get some kind of joy from seeing this precious child, right? It brings them joy. That's how they benefit from this transaction taking place, and that's also a driver of why they are using the service as well. Even though they're not the poster, they're still using the service and benefiting from it. But those are all people whose, joy or the way they benefit from the transaction aligns with the well-being of the child. There are certainly viewers, users of the service whose joy or who the way they benefit from the transaction taking place does not align with the well-being of the child, and that's something to consider as well. These are creeps, really, and I don't want to get too far into that, but it is something that I have to point out. Okay, so you've got this service, which is social media, and you've got the provider of the service and the user of the service. Somebody posts their child online, and then there are all these people who benefit. The provider of the service benefits, the poster of the child benefits, the aunts and uncles, grandmas, grandpas, the people who love the child and it brings them joy to see them, they benefit, and also the people who have bad intentions, they benefit as well, right? So a lot of people benefit from this one little transaction, but who doesn't benefit? The child. Okay, so I know there's nuance here, and we're going to get to that nuance. Just forewarning, I think it's mostly BS, but we are gonna get there. Okay, you can come up with ways to say that the child benefits from being posted involuntarily online. Sure, but for now, the case I'm making is that there's this transaction happening, and multiple parties benefit from the transaction, of which the child is not one. Okay? And by definition, when a person is being used, especially involuntarily, to benefit a party or multiple parties, of which that person is not one, that is exploitation. And when that person is a child, that is, by definition, child exploitation. Just want to be clear here. I know that this doesn't meet the definition of child exploitation from a legal stance. This is a philosophy channel. This is a philosophical definition. My understanding of the legal definition is that there has to be some kind of demonstrable harm being done to the child. Again, I think it's debatable that it's harmless. Certainly the severity of the harm is probably low enough where it certainly wouldn't meet the legal test for child exploitation. So I just want to be clear. I'm not accusing people of child exploitation in the legal sense. This is a philosophical perspective on posting children online, one where I am saying that it is child exploitation from a philosophical perspective. Okay, so this is where you got to grab the lion. Okay, so here you are, chained in the cave, just enjoying life, engaging with the shadows, and some guy comes along and says, hey, you're exploiting your child by posting him or her online. And the natural reaction is going to be to reject me because of that, right? That's a very uncomfortable feeling, and we're going to get into why that is so uncomfortable and why the natural reaction is to reject that information and reject the provider of that information. Like most people, you probably have a worldview in which only bad people exploit children. And like most people, you probably have an identity in which you are not a bad person. So for you to accept this information, if you are somebody who posts your child online, something needs to change. And the ego does not want something to change. So that is why you want to reject this information outright. You don't even want to consider it. The ego is saying, hey, look, I've got this worldview, I've got this identity, this information, this truth is inconsistent with that. So rather than accept it, make some kind of change to either the worldview or the identity or the behavior, we're going to get into that too. We're just going to reject this right now. Okay, we're putting a stop to it. And that's when you got to grab the lion, right? Because that's when that discomfort happens. So right now, I want you to, I call it grabbing the lion, but whatever it is you have to do, maybe you don't need to visualize it like I need to, but sit in the discomfort. Don't rush past it. Okay? Let it resonate with you. And this isn't easy. This isn't easy. That's why I spent 6 months laying the foundation leading up to this part, okay? It's not easy. Maybe your heart's racing. Maybe you get kind of a knot in your stomach, right? Maybe you've already, blown past this video. So it's not easy to sit in this discomfort, but it's worth it. If you want to escape the cave, you have to sit in that discomfort. So while you're sitting in that discomfort, I want you to think of the ways you are trying to reject the information. This can be a bit tricky, but what are the reasons you're coming up with to convince yourself that I am wrong? Try and identify them. Say, oh, it's just for grandma and grandpa, right? They like to see, little Johnny. Or, my child loves being on camera. Or you might just say, hey, you're overreacting. It's just a photo. All those things are true. But none of those things change the argument that I laid out before, which concludes that it is still child exploitation. So all of these, reasons that you may have come up with to reject what I'm saying are probably, and again, maybe I'm not saying I have all the answers here. Maybe you've come up with something that, legitimately disproves my point. Okay, maybe. But it's still a useful exercise to sit in the discomfort and engage with your own thoughts as to why this makes you uncomfortable and how you are trying to reject it. Okay. So after being presented with this information, there are essentially 4 ways forward. There's 4 paths you can take. One path is to reject it. So just reject the information outright. Nothing changes. You go on with your life as if you didn't even hear this information. If you're still watching this video, I'm assuming you haven't taken that path, which is awesome. Good job. The second path you might take is to change your identity. Okay, so if you, like most people, have an identity where you are not a bad person, right? But you have a worldview where only bad people exploit children, and you're not changing that worldview, you didn't reject the information, you can change your identity to one where you are not a good person. so, so you would be a bad person. Going back to the grab the lion video, that would be a submissive reaction to the lion. The third path you might take is to change your worldview. You don't reject the information, you don't change your identity, right? But you change your worldview where currently only bad people exploit children. But now you modify that to add some nuance in there to make room for good people might engage in exploitative behavior with their children. And this is where that nuance really comes in. And it's okay to be gentle with yourself. Okay, I really want to stress that. Maybe, a sense of community or social connection is really important to mom, right? And since having a child, maybe mom feels a little isolated from, her previous social circle, and by uploading photos of her child, which is her life now, she gets to, hold on to some of that social connection. That is a change of the worldview, right? Because really, that is still about mom, right? That's about the poster. That's not about the child. Now, again, going back to what I said before, you can come up with ways to say that the child does benefit, right? And this is one of them. So there is, an argument to be made where by mom being happy and being in a good mental state, that has positive wraparound benefits to the child. I accept that. That is a nuance that might be embedded into your new worldview, right? So mom is still a good person, okay? She acknowledges that, yeah, this is exploitative in nature, but the risk of harm she might assess is relatively low for the child, and the benefit of being connected to her social circle, feeling connected to her friends and family, outweighs that potential risk. So she therefore continues to engage in that exploitative behavior, and does not cease to be a good person, right? It does not make her a bad person. Another example, we'll do dad this time. Maybe dad is a little disappointed with the way his life went, right? He had big dreams, big aspirations, maybe sports or professional career, maybe money-wise, and didn't really live up to his expectations in life, his potential. But he knows he's a good dad, right? And he knows he's doing this right. And he wants to share that. I had all these big hopes and dreams and I didn't live up to them, but this makes up for all of it. And he wants people to know that he's happy and content and he's doing well in life because he's a dad and a good dad. Again, that is a reasonable thought process. Okay, but also, again, it is about the dad. It's not about the child. And you can make the same wraparound argument as we did with mom. By tending to this really emotional need of dad, he is in a better mental state day to day, which has direct implications on his relationship with his child. Okay, so you can reject the information, you can change your identity, you can change your worldview, but the fourth path is you can change your behavior. And that's what we're going to talk about now. This path is the magic of escaping the cave. Okay? This is why Plato's Allegory is so relevant to our lives 2,400 years ago and today. Unchaining yourself and escaping the cave allows you to change your behavior in ways that will allow you to better achieve your goals, your desired outcomes. Obviously, the change in behavior here is ceasing to post children online. You no longer do that anymore. So you don't reject the information. You accept the truth that posting children online is exploitative in nature. You don't change your identity. You maintain the identity that you are a good person. You don't change your worldview that good people do not exploit children. So therefore, you change your behavior. So with a worldview where good people do not engage in exploitative behaviors with children, and an identity in which you are a good person, and now having accepted the truth that posting children online is exploitative in nature, the change in behavior is to stop posting children online. So, why would you take that path, right? When you can just change your worldview to make room for that nuance and maintain your identity as a good person. That seems to be the path of least resistance. I totally understand and accept if you and most people take that path. But I do want to spend some time going over why you and we as a society might take the fourth path, the path certainly less traveled, which is to change our behavior. And that reason is love. So this channel, like I mentioned at the beginning of every video, is about truth and love. I believe the answer to our collective challenges right now is truth and love. We've covered the truth. Posting children online is exploiting them. But here's where the love comes in. Okay, and this is something that the shadows will have you confused about. The motivation behind the post is good. People post their children online because they love them. They're proud of them. They want to show the world how much they love their kids. Right? That is a good thing. Okay? And again, the truth hurts because it pierces the heart. The bigger the heart, the bigger the hurt. But the shadows in the cave will have you confusing the motivation with the act itself. Okay, so the motivation behind the post is good. It's probably based on love. But the post itself is not an act of love. That's something else. That you're doing that for yourself. Not posting, even when you're proud, even when you want to show them off, that's love. Sacrificing your own needs for your child, in the interest of your child, that's love. To keep your child away from exploitation, that's love. Now, a lot of people are going to react to this in a way that presumes I'm overreacting. Why is it an act of love to keep your child away from social media? I want to get ahead of that. I'm going to address that now. Like I mentioned before, there are absolutely real risks to posting your child online. Okay? There are many videos online about this. I'm not an expert on this topic, but there certainly are very real reasons why posting your child online poses risk to their well-being. Okay? Again, I don't think I'm the best person to speak to that, but for sure that exists. So that is one reason in itself, right? If there's any risk at all to the child, even if the risk is small, if there's any risk, but no benefit, that alone is a good reason in the name of love for the child to keep them away from that. That's the act of love, right? Your own desires, your own urge to post, and for whatever reasons you may have for wanting to post them. Just the fact that it does pose some risk, even if the risk is small, is enough reason to sacrifice your own needs in the name of love for the child. So that's one thing. But, this is a philosophy channel. I'm going to take it a step in a different direction, in a more philosophical direction, which is, even if the risk is small, and even if nothing bad ever happens to your child, and I hope and pray that that is the case, you're still feeding the beast. Okay? We tend to share this collective worldview in which, we as a society reject the exploitation of children. But that is not true. An example of this, being not true is child stardom. We know that making children famous is typically bad for them. But we do it anyway. We watch, we click, we subscribe, right? We buy their stuff, right? Knowing that it's bad for them. We're feeding the beast, okay? And you might say, well, that's not my child, okay? I would never do that to my child. First of all, I find that hard to believe. I can't say I know what you would do. I'm not claiming to know what you would do. But if you're doing it already for likes and comments, I find it hard to believe you wouldn't do it for likes and comments and millions of dollars. But anyway, let's say you wouldn't. So let's say you would never exploit your child in a way that child stardom does, like making like Justin Bieber level of fame. Sure. But you're still feeding the beast. And the beast doesn't care that it's not your child. To the beast, every child is your child. It doesn't differentiate. Going back to Justin Bieber, he's somebody who's in adulthood spoken a lot about this. I'm speaking on Justin Bieber's experience, and I hope that's okay because it's really not my place, but he's been quite open about it. So I hope that's okay. I'm reading a quote here from 2005. He said, "I grew up in a system that rewarded my gift but didn't always protect my soul. There were moments I felt used, rushed, shaped into something that I didn't fully choose. That kind of pressure leaves you wounds you don't see on stage." He says, "I'm not a product. I'm not what the industry demanded. I am a son." How does that not break your heart? Think of, for millennials in particular, all the presence he had in our lives, whatever your relationship was with Justin Bieber, whether you were a fan or a hater, or even just, a kind of a bystander, but you still watched and listened, and, you were actively participating in his exploitation for your own benefit. That's not somebody else's child. That's our child. And I don't mean a child of the state. I mean a child of humanity. Every child is a child of humanity, our children. And you can say it benefited him too financially, but in his own words, he says he felt used and shaped into something that he didn't choose. Right? We took that from him. And Again, I'm not saying the severity is the same, but you're doing that when you post your child online. You're shaping them into something that they're not fully choosing. Right? Justin Bieber says that he was used in a way that didn't always protect his soul. I think we're hard pressed to say that we're not doing the same thing when we're posting our children online. Right? Are we really thinking about and protecting their souls? So that's what I mean when I say you're feeding the beast, and then something happens when we get a glimpse behind the curtain and we see how big and strong and powerful and scary the beast really is, and we act all shocked and surprised. Meanwhile, we're the ones who've been feeding the beast for generations. Of course it's big and strong and powerful. So bringing this back to the love part, how do we remember this channel is about truth and love? How do we apply this truth to incorporate more love into the world? You starve the beast. We are not a society that rejects the exploitation of children. We are a society that welcomes the exploitation of children, depending on the trade-off. Right? Which is, in other words, a negotiation. We are effectively telling the world, each other, other actors, bad actors, despite what we say with our words, what we say with our actions, with our behavior, is that the exploitation of our children is negotiable. The act of love, how we use this truth to incorporate more love into the world, love for our children, is we sacrifice our own needs to starve the beast. We no longer engage in any exploitative behavior. It is now a non-negotiable. Whether it's Justin Bieber levels of fame or posts on Facebook for grandma, we are no longer feeding the beast. That's love. All right, so I'm going to wrap this up here. I hope this video was useful in your understanding of how Plato's allegory of the cave can be applied in real life and how it can be useful in incorporating more love into the world. I know not everybody is going to be happy with this video. If you end up unfollowing because of it, that's totally fine. No hard feelings at all. I'm looking for my people who are looking to escape the cave, understanding that the truth can hurt, but it will set you free. And if enough of us escape the cave, we can create a world where everyone is free, starting with our children.